My favorite part of spring is watching all of these twigs and dry grass, things that were brown and really looked dead, seemingly just coming alive suddenly out of nowhere. Last time I left my house, there was nothing green on that little vine. And look, it's already setting buds for spring. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to see them. But since it's cold and raining outside, what we're gonna do is go inside. I'm gonna have some hot tea to just relax, and I'm starting a new project. Today, I wanna give you a few tips on how to make a gauge swatch. Not just how to make it, but how to adjust the height and width of your stitches to make sure you get your gauge swatch correct the second time. Of course, the first time you make your gauge swatch, you'll just be seeing how high and how wide are your stitches using the yarn and hook included in the pattern. The second time is where we make all of the adjustments to make sure we are dead on correct. So let's get some yarn and let's get started. I'm going to show you the golden loop method of making your gauge stitches taller or shorter as needed. When you make your gauge swatch with the hook that the designer indicates in the pattern, you're really aiming for the width of your stitches. Your hook size will determine your width. How you make the stitches determines the height. And I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let's talk about the term golden loop. I said this earlier that I'll show you the golden loop method. The golden loop is that loop that you pull up. So, yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, pull up a loop. That loop that you pull up, that is our golden loop. When you keep a lot of tension on your yarn feeding hand and you keep yanking on that yarn feeding hand, there's a lot of tension there. We call that yanking your stitches. It will make your stitches shorter. When you yank your stitches, your golden loop becomes very small and overall affects the height of the stitch. The opposite of yanking is carrying too much tension in your hook hand, and you end up lifting your golden loop quite high, and it causes a much taller stitch. Then of course you have the middle of the road, what we call riding your stitch, because your hook basically rides along the top edge of your bottom row of stitches, and your loop does not get too tall, but it also doesn't get yanked down really short. And when you're crocheting, you should always aim for that middle section. But hold on, I'm going to show you more details, and I'm also going to show you some really unique tricks you can use by implementing riding, lifting, or yanking your stitches into patterns to make them more unique. So here you'll see I've made 3 tiny swatches. I was impatient and didn't make big ones. They are each made with this same yarn, and it's a DK weight yarn, and they are all made with the same hook, a 6.5mm hook. They each have 3 rows of double crochets, and each row is 6 stitches, but you can see that they are all approximately the same width, but they are not anywhere close to the same height. I'm going to start by demonstrating the yanking of the golden loop. That's where we carry a lot of tension in our yarn feeding hand. You'll see that golden loop gets really small, and every time I pull up a loop, it gets yanked back down and the stitch becomes quite short. So let's do it again. We're going to pull up that loop, but keeping that heavy tension in our yarn hand, you'll see it continues to shorten and shorten our stitches, and that golden loop stitch gets so tiny. Sometimes yanking your stitches can come in handy. For instance, when you're making amigurumi, you need tight, tiny stitches to keep all the stuffing in. You don't want to see your stuffing fluffing out from between your stitches. So yanking's not always bad, but you need to know when it's good and when it's not. Now let's demonstrate the lifting technique. When we're lifting our stitches, we're carrying a little more tension in our hook hand, and we are pulling a little bit more with the hook, and it raises up our golden loop. So we yarn over, we pull up a loop, and we pull that loop all the way up. Like it is raising its hands for a hallelujah. This loop is reaching for the sky. It makes your stitches taller. They stand up straight and tall, but sometimes this makes your projects too big and they don't come out quite with the same tightness or definition that maybe you were looking for. Alright, let's talk about that riding stitch. When we talk about it riding, we're mostly talking about the position of your hook in relation to the row below it. You'll notice as I work through these stitches, I am neither pulling the hook up too high, nor am I pulling it too tight with my yarn feeding hand. It all just kind of rides right there in the middle, nice and even. A riding stitch usually has a balance of tension between your yarn feeding hand and your hook hand, which helps you create nice even stitches. When you teach crochet, often I try to teach this riding technique so that the stitches are always generally in the middle. It's easy to go up or down and switch it around, but if you're starting on that middle baseline, it's very easy to make adjustments later. I want to take a second and talk about how being aware of this technique can really take you to the next level when you're crocheting, because not only is it very easy for you to adjust to whatever the designer's tension was. You can easily adjust the height of your stitches, but it also helps you in other areas like making popcorn stitches or making treble crochets. Let me show you. If I tend to have a lifting technique or even a riding technique when I'm making my treble crochets, they very quickly become loose and floppy. When I use a treble crochet stitch, I often just yank it a little bit to tighten it up. Look at the difference between these two stitches. That first one I made, I was kind of riding. This one, you'll see I'm lifting the stitch, and it's a mess. It's all over the place. It doesn't look neat. Let's try the same stitch, but we're going to yank it, and you'll see how much neater and tidier it looks. I used a lot of treble crochets in my Primula pattern that just came out this last Tuesday. So if you're looking for a good lacy spring pattern that has treble crochets, go snag that pattern and try this technique. See? So much neater. I'm going to show you where it's beneficial to lift your stitches instead of yanking them, and we're going to use one of my all-time favorite stitches, the puff stitch, or popcorn stitch, or bobble stitch. Are those all the same, or are they different? I can never remember. You'll see I'm pulling up all of my golden loops because puffs have lots of them. So just pull them up. I'm pulling them up really high. When you pull up your puff stitch loops like this, they get so puffy. Extra puffy puff stitches. Let's contrast that with what it looks like when we ride or yank our yarn. Like it's not even a puff anymore. It's more like a little pod or like a little bead, but they're not nearly as fluffy. So, to sum up, while I sit here and work on my sweater, there are 3 different ways you can raise or lower the height of your stitches. You can yank your stitches, which makes them short and implies a lot of tension in your yarn hand. You can lift your stitches, which makes them tall and implies more tension in your hook hand, or ride them and keep them nice and smooth and in the middle with a balanced tension. And there are lots of reasons to lift or ride or yank your stitches to create different textures and different techniques. So if you're looking for some fun puff stitch patterns where you can really embrace the fluffiness of them, go check out any of my patterns in the Verona series. The Verona pullover will be coming out soon. Quick plug for that. I am still working on the YouTube video for it. But I just want you to know, this technique, it definitely will take you to the next level in crocheting. Those puzzling things where you're like, I just can't seem to get it right. I can't get the gauge just perfect. A lot of times it's the difference in how you treat your golden loop. Do you yank it? Do you lift it? Or do you ride it? So I hope this has been really helpful. If it has, give it a thumbs up, like, comment, share, all of the things, and follow me over on Instagram or TikTok for more helpful tips and really cool patterns.